I'm going to record this in case RJ asks me for details or a call or whatever, right? Because I've never shared any of these calls with RJ before. But
Yeah, he actually just walked through the office and he heard us talking for a minute or two.
what's that?
He actually just walked through the office and he heard us talking for a couple of minutes.
Oh, well, in Dason Keller's thing, and the reason I want to record this is, we've talked about this stuff before, and Justin's not on the call now, so maybe I'll send this to RJ, send him a link, and then maybe he'll want to share it with Justin. I don't know, right? Because Justin's not really a student, but he is the one doing the work, and I feel like I don't want anyone to think we're tattletaling or gossiping about somebody when they're not in the room, right? So when I look at Dason Keller's repair order, no color, no plate, no mileage, but it's a 2005 Ninja, so we know it's got some miles, right? Mm-hmm. It says diagnose, no start, but there's no description. So it doesn't tell you, like, you're the technician. Your number one question when you talk to Justin should well, you shouldn't have to talk to Justin. You should be able to look at the paper and have a story, and it should say diagnose, no start, and then the description should say something like customer states, turnkey, no noise, turnkey, and there's a click, turnkey, and it cranks but no start. Right. Customer states vehicle starts and runs for half an hour, but when they turn it off, it doesn't restart, right? Because here's the deal, with no story, what happens if you go out, put the key in, turn it, push the button, and it starts?
Yeah.
You're back at the desk going, dude, I don't know what to tell you. It starts, right? But there needs to be details. And then I brought this up with you before. I have no idea what an estimate parts service is, 50 of them for $1 each.
Right, that is something that Justin does. It's probably, it just says, that could be anything. A lot of times I'll do that for oil and filter, and I'll just quickly put an estimate of $50 on it for oil and filter. And, then when the bike is done, then he goes back and he, puts the actual part numbers in, and he tells me where if $50 is an estimate, it could be a little bit less, it could be a little bit more.
Well, the best I can tell, the best I can tell is he's just trying to pad the estimate, maybe to make the sale easier, right? Like maybe if he gets a commitment for $270, I'm good, thank you. If he gets a commitment for $270 at the beginning, because it's $268, then maybe he's thinking when he sells whatever's wrong, maybe that helps cushion the blow. I don't know, but it's weird. And there's a battery pre-sold on this, so we make an assumption that it's a battery, but could be a harness. You know what I mean? I prefer. So let's say I don't like, right? I'm not going to say I don't like. I prefer that service writers don't pre-sell any diagnosis at the counter, because it sets a false expectation for the customer. Because once you look at this motorcycle, chances are it's going to need more than a battery, or it might not even need a battery. It could be, a bad negative connection at the starter, right? So I really hesitate to sell things at the counter before it's diagnosed. Because let's say you put a battery in. Let's say you diagnose it, boom, it's got 3 volts. You put it on the charger. A day later, it's got 4 volts. You go, okay, it's a bad battery. So you put a battery in. Is the customer really going to want to pay $130 diagnosis for a battery that was already sold at the service counter?
Oh, I see. Makes sense.
Right. And then the other thing is date printed and promise time at the top right is the same. And we somehow have to build the process that our promise time, especially where diagnostics are concerned, is where the service writer or manager is buying time for the technician to work it in and get it diagnosed. So when something's dropped off for a no-start diagnosis, the assumption would be that it would not be same-day service. The assumption is you're leaving this vehicle, we got to diagnose it and then sell you whatever's wrong. So, if I wrote it up on the 24th my initial promise time would be like the 27th or 29th. And then I would tell the customer, this isn't promising that it'll be done. This is when I guarantee I'll have an answer for you as to what your concerns are and tell you what needs done.
Of course.
Yeah. So again, I realize this isn't the invoice. This is the repair order. But the repair order is what builds the relationship for the visit. The repair order is what communicates to the customer. Once the customer leaves, anything that was said verbally gets flushed, right? So the next day, the customer pulls us out and goes, oh, I should check on my bike. I need the phone number or whatever, right? He wants to call Justin. Then he looks and he goes, well, they should have had it done yesterday, and I'm already paying $300 here. So is the bike going to be done or not done? You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're done with that one. Eric Moya, RO ends in 3022.
Eric Moya. Okay. Let's see. Trying to see about which one that I worked on right now. These are. I guess this is just work yet to be done. Okay. Alrighty.
Okay. Same notes as you would see on that last repair order. As far as descriptions, there are no descriptions. So when you have even a line, and I kind of picked on this repair order because it's important no matter what the service is. So if it's perform an oil change, customer request we perform oil change due to time or mileage. Customer request oil change, to examine for an oil leak. I mean, we want to know what's the reason, right? Here's the deal, and here's why it's important. You do this repair. Let's say it comes to you and you work on Eric's motorcycle and the guy drives away. And then he comes back the next day and he goes, man, I'm really not happy with the service you guys just did on my bike. And Justin goes, why? I don't understand. Well, I just paid you guys to do the oil change and it's still leaking oil. What? You're like, I don't get it. Could have a base gasket leak, a head gasket leak, could have a side cover leak, could have all kinds of problems, right? And what you see as seepage and use, I mean, it's a 2009 Kawasaki, and it apparently sits forever because it's only got 11,000 miles on it. So what you perceive as being seepage at the side cover, or what you perceive as a lack of customer maintenance because the bike came in dirty, the customer thinks you're diagnosing as an oil leak when you're doing the oil change because the description's not written in, right? So we need to know why. The brake flush, why? Is the lever soft? Is it time and mileage? Is the fluid discolored? Is it because it's in the owner's manual? But you as a technician need to know why you're doing this work. If it's for a squishy lever, right? Well, then the question is, you get on it and you go, well, it feels fine. It feels like every other, VN 900 I've ever ridden. Did the guy just?
I can totally do that. And sometimes there will be a job for me. It tells me what to do. I'm like, Justin, why are we doing it? Is there a problem? Or the bike's not working? Why are we doing this?
All of these notes have to be on the repair order, right? In this situation, let's say the customer bought the bike used, which is very plausible. He rides the bike and he's used to a Ducati, right? Then he gets on this thing and the brake lever is just super squishy. And then he says, well, do a brake fluid flush. And then, so you do it. And then the guy comes back on Tuesday and goes, you guys just serviced this thing and the lever's still squishy. And you're like, well, dude, it's not a 999, right? It's not an 1199. It's a VN 900. That's the way it feels. You're going to have a dissatisfied customer because the expectation wasn't set during the repair order process, right? Coolant flush, same thing. Whenever I do anything coolant oriented on somebody's vehicle, any vehicle,
yes,
right up front questions: has this vehicle overheated? Has this vehicle lost coolant previously? And then if those answers are yes, then it becomes coolant diagnosis and coolant pressure check, not a coolant flush. Because if you do the coolant flush and he runs out with a bad head gasket and fries that motor in 500 miles, he's going to come right back and say to you guys, you just service the coolant system and now I need an engine.
Okay.
So this vehicle is a 2009 VN 900. We know that it's red. It apparently isn't registered, and we had the wrong mileage when he wrote it up. And
Okay,
we promised it out.
Oh yeah, okay. Come on now.
And promised it out the same day that it was written up. I'm on to Uriel Rodriguez, ends in 3007. This RO fundamentally is set up pretty aggressively. Like sales wise, I think Justin hit things pretty good. Detail is horrible. So reinstall the stator cover, right? The description needs to say customer supplied parts. Customer request we reinstall stator cover, was removed for customer diagnosis, was cracked, was whatever, right? But there's no reason why to reinstall the stator cover. And I see that you guys have the pin in the dowel charged out and a gasket charged out. So the assumption is that the stator cover and the hardware was customer supplied, but it's not specified on the repair order. That's important because if you don't specify customer supplied parts, the repair order implies a warranty on the parts. Does that make sense?
Write that down.
Okay. So let's say that you do this work and the cover has a hairline crack in it that you don't see during the install, and 500,000 miles later, this thing cracks and pukes oil all over the guy's boot and he falls down. On paper, you're responsible.
Wow.
Okay. This is the kind of thing that eats a dealer alive. This is what changes the name on the top of the dealership when they lose a lawsuit and somebody wins your dealership. Right? So these are the types of details, they seem really, really minor, but based on my experience in the field and seeing the results of this, I get really amped up about it, because you'd think, oh, there's no way somebody could sue you and take your dealership. Yeah, somebody could, if they end up maimed in a wheelchair, lose a leg, whatever, right? And in this situation, it's not even your part. So we don't know the color of the motorcycle. We don't know the license plate. It didn't have any miles on it, but it's a 2007. There's no description on the job lines, and it's got diagnostics on it and was promised out the same day it was written. The diagnostics, however, though, like I said, foundationally, he was pretty aggressive here. Diagnosed the error code. I don't know what the error code is or what the description of the error is, but there's no description, but it says diagnose error code. And then it says diagnose no start, with no description of what the no start condition is. But you've got an hour and a half as a technician to play with this thing and figure out what's wrong with it. So it looks like you get a half hour to put the stator cover back on, and then you get an hour and a half to figure out what's wrong about it. But it's kind of hard to do a no start diagnosis if you got the engine cover off, right?
Right.
But why are you doing a no start diagnosis, and why is the stator cover off? And are you halfway into diagnosing a no start condition anyway? So it would really suck to put the stator cover back on and then figure out that you got to pull that off, an hour later.
Yeah.
So that ticket it's a combination good and bad. You've got money. As a technician, you've got time to try and figure out what's wrong with it. But unfortunately, you don't have any story to go with working on the motorcycle.
Yeah. I'm seeing the trend. I'm seeing the trend here. It starting to look like what he liked to do is verbally tell us, what's going on instead of putting it on the RO.
It's got to be on the paperwork. Everything that's done on the keyboard, writing anything up, has to be done with the expectation that you could die on the way home that day. And that's a miserable way to think of it or phrase it, but it's true, right? You get hit by a bus, hit by a car, a drunk driver could take you out. And if that happens, how is the rest of the team that you leave behind going to make those 50 customers complete or happy? Or, there's a responsibility that comes with generating this paperwork, right? And not just that, but they're all legal documents. So if for some reason a customer isn't happy or decides they want reimbursed on their bill, all they got to do is file a small court claim, right? And they would win. Any of these repair orders would be a win for the customer or for the OEM in the courts. So the only ones I'm really pointing out to you are the things where if somebody wanted to argue about paying their bill, they'd be completely justified and not have to pay.
Right, because these are not filled out entirely. You're correct.
Erica Showalter ends in 2997. Again, we've got a motorcycle that's old enough to be registered and have some miles on it, but we have no registration, no color, and no mileage. It's in for a no start diagnosis, and we pre-sold the battery with no story, and it was promised out the same day. The one for Andrew Wade ends in 2944.
Find that one.
I thought this one was weird because on the flag for it, it says the flag rate time was 1.24 hours. I thought, well, that was pretty exact.
Okay, let me find. There it is, Andrew Wade. Let's take a look at that. 944.
But it was for mountain balance front and rear tires. It's just that's an oddly precise flat rate time.
Let's see here. Okay, I'm looking at it. So
yeah, it's just I noticed that you guys have these weird flat rate times, like for your tires especially. It's like 0.64 or something for a tire, or point.
It's 0.64 for a tire on the bike, front or rear, and then 0.32 for tire off the bike, front or rear.
Yeah. Okay, it's just unique. most people round up their labor. So on this one, and again, it's somewhat trivial, but we don't have the first line isn't a line. Like, so the first line doesn't have a task. It says description, take a look at the rear brake, seems to make a grinding, squeaking noise at slow stops sometimes. Okay. But then it has oil change stuff charged out, and under labor, it says pit stop service. So he didn't use the program job, pit stop service or oil change visit or whatever, and then fill in the details. So it's kind of like a weird brake diagnosis that just happens to include an oil change. And then the tires, you're going to install front and rear tires, but the tires are billed out on line 1 and they're not billed out on line 2. So sounds trivial, but super, super important if you ever had to go to court, right? Because the job has the job line has to match the job, right? So the job line for 1 has to be perform the pit stop service or the oil change service or whatever you guys want to call it. And then it needs to have the oil change products on it. And then the next one is mountain balance front and rear tires. Description would be customer requests new tires due to wear. Customer requests new tires due to dry cracking, to age, but there's got to be a reason.
This one here, I remember it. I did the pit stop, which is something we do. It's the oil change, and it's almost like a free goodwill, and it's a goodwill inspection. We'll adjust lever and make all those little adjustments, and do a safety inspection of the whole bike. That's what pit stop service is, and includes an oil change. But when I went over the bike with the inspection form, I noticed that the tires were dry and cracked. So I recommended new tires, and then we called the customer, and the customer approved the new tires. So the tires had to be ordered. So it took a week to get the tires. So there's probably another RO with the tire install on it. Or there's more to this RO that we just don't have on here because it wasn't one that I grabbed.
Well, then the story to that would be customer approved tires, as diagnosed on multi-point inspection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, every job on the ticket needs to have a story as to why or how. So, on this one, you sold the tires. So customer approved tires is recommended by multi-point inspection due to cracking, due to wear, due to age, due to whatever. And then just as a side note, those multi-point inspections, they should actually be a separate line. You should have a line built into into your system where, so customer request pit stop service, that's one line, with parts and labor build out. And then there should be a no charge line, goodwill inspection performed, performed as courtesy for customer, right?
Yeah, that would look good on there. They're like, hey, I got something free. This is nice.
That's the marketing and the relationship behind it. The next one I want to cover is Matthew McClooney. Matthew McClooney is also homeless, because I think the other one was homeless, but the one that we covered, who was that? Yeah, Erica Showalter was homeless, and Matthew McClooney is homeless, meaning like you don't have complete customer information. On this one, it was just, it says mount front and rear tire. There's no story, and the mileage is the same in and out. So we just got to make sure, especially when we do anything with, tire, suspension, brakes, that, at least on the invoice, you're going to show a difference in mileage to account for your test drive, right? If a customer gets brand new tires and falls down a quarter mile from your shop, whether it's your fault or not, it's your fault if you don't have test ride miles.
I see, yeah, the work was done. I was thinking maybe the work wasn't done on this one, but it was. I see the flash.
Yeah.
And the mileage is the same.
Okay. Lance Miller ends in 2891. Lance Miller is also homeless. And I'm assuming, this is a big assumption, that this was just a carry-out wheel. Okay.
Let me find that one.
Yeah, there's no VIN number, no plate, no color, no miles. It says replace valve stem. It says valve stem, TR412, rubber, $1.95, and 0.32 in hours for you to do that. So I'm assuming it's a carry-out wheel. Here's the important part. If it's a carry-out wheel, it has to be part of the story, right? Because this guy is removing and reinstalling his own wheel. So that has to be documented in a friendly way. Customer brought carry out wheel for installation of valve stem. And it sounds minute. It sounds like I'm nitpicking, but the customer is doing the work on the bike. You're only working on the wheel. So when the customer puts this wheel back on and misses a spacer, or doesn't get the brake caliper on right, or because you're a mechanic, you know what he could miss, right?
Yes.
When that goes wrong and he tries to say, oh, you guys messed up my wheel. Nobody messed up your wheel, bro. You didn't put the wheel on right. That's not our problem, right? So all of that has to be documented. I'm up to Steve Browie. Steve Browie is one of my pet peeve repair orders. It was brought in and promised out on the same day. It's a 2007 KTM 450, which, by the way, is one of my favorite motorcycles. I love those things. We've got a VIN number, no color, no plate, no miles. And this is where that 3 C's thing comes in. The 3 C's, concern, cause, correction. Right? I've talked to you guys before about that. Concern, cause, correction. He has here, because Justin wrote the ticket, it says perform carb clean and adjustment. Okay, there's no story. There is no story at all, right? So if I'm a mechanic and I get this ticket, Okay, why am I cleaning the carbs? Does the bike run? Does the bike run poorly? You know, what's the implied benefit of doing the service? What's the expectation of the customer? What am I making the adjustment for? You know, is he going to go ride it in the dunes? Is he going to go take it to Colorado? Am I changing the jetting because he's going to leave sea level? Am I putting in a high altitude kit? Like what does the customer think is going to happen? Right. And so that's super, super important. Anything, because when it says perform carb clean and adjustment, and you being a mechanic, you might go, well, I guess his throttle cable's loose. You know, I'll do the maintenance, right? So I'll do the carb clean, I'll adjust the throttle cable, I'll do this, I'll make sure that the play in the throttle's right. And then the guy rides it and he goes, I still got a flat spot at 3,000 RPM. And you're going, I didn't tune out a flat spot at 3,000 RPM. I fixed your cable.
Right. Again, right? I think what our service writer is doing is not writing this stuff down. He's just verbally telling us technicians what's going on with the bike and not documenting it. That's
well, and I don't. So beating that dead horse is beating a dead horse, right? But when you and I did the first audit, roughly about what was that, 8 weeks ago at this point, we did that first audit, and I said these are the things that your service counter needs to work on, right? And then Justin sat in on a few of these calls. And
yes.
So, and we discussed it, and he said, oh, I'm making a lot of progress in this direction. Well, unless you cherry picked and just picked me out repair orders that I would pick apart, I mean, if this is what your normal repair orders look like, if you ever get an audit by BMW or Ducati, RJ is going to have to write a big check because none of this work is justified to the standards of a warranty ticket.
Yeah. There was no cherry picking here. We just
so that to me is an important thing, you know. No, I got that one. I don't think there's any that I really need to go over beyond this because I think the point is more than made. The internal work, by the way, looks great. Like, I don't need a customer for internal work. You got 3 miles when you prep a bike. It's got 4 miles when it's done. Like, that's fine, right? When he closes out that paperwork, when you're doing a prep job, I say prep, PDI, when you close out the paperwork for that, like it says odometer 3, right? But the vehicle's still a stock unit, so it doesn't have a mileage in, mileage out field on the repair order. And so I get that. But in the invoicing process, if your system is providing a field for mileage out, those numbers need to be different because you need to show a test drive on a new product. Okay. But other than that looks fine. The story thing's got to be fixed, especially on the diagnosis, man. That's, as a technician, you guys. So here's the deal. I know that your service counter thinks you guys are busy, and he's making himself busy because he's not doing the work up front. He's spreading the work out over the whole process, which is making it more work. It's easier to do something once correctly than it is to do it, you know, kind of halfway and then try and fill in the rest of the halfway 5 other stations down the process. So he feels busy, but you're not busy. And you might look in your lot and see a bunch of bikes that need worked on, but you're not as busy as you think you are, right? And so what we need to do, you know, the best way to say this, and it's so trite because it's so common when trainers talk about this, but you know, when you're driving down the highway and you see the dotted line, like the passing lane,
yes.
Right? If you look right outside the window and you look down at that line, what's that line look like to you, Jeff?
No, it's a blue. It looks like a solid line.
It's a bit, things are flying by, right?
Yeah.
If you pick up your vision and you look further down the road, what does that line look like?
A dotted line.
A static dotted line. It's not even coming at you fast, right? When I used to be a road race instructor, I used to tell people, stop looking at the front of your motorcycle. Stop looking at the apex of the corner you're driving to. You need to be looking as far down the track as you can, because the further you look down the track, the slower the exercise, the slower the physical nature is to you mentally. And so the more you can pick your head up and look down line, the less harried or the less stressed.
Okay.
Is that the 11 o'clock timer? I went over time?
Yeah, I can relate to that analogy because in retail, I used to teach my managers to do what I called rolling out the carpet so the employees could run on it and keeping that carpet way ahead. The job's all lined up so they can just keep going.
Well, that is what I'm getting at. When you get a repair order as a technician, you need to be able to read the repair order, grab the keys, and go to work. Not read the repair order, go to the service counter and ask what it means. Right? Because if you're spending time trying to play, tag or hide and seek inside the shop, you are taken away from your efficiency and effectivity. So if you remember 3 phone calls ago, we said, what would add 1.5 to 2 hours of efficiency or productivity to each technician daily?
Yeah, we've discussed it many times.
And dude, that's $250,000 in your shop, based on your shop rate and your parts expenditures. That's $250,000 in lost parts and labor sales, not having this paperwork done correctly.
You should have turned this off. Leave me alone. Okay.
Now, we kind of went over time a little bit, but I want to share my screen with you about some homework.
Okay.
You got a moment for me, or do you have to go?
No, I don't have to go.
Okay. Let me share this. I mean, it's been a while since we talked, so I want to make sure that you get the full Monty on this call, man. Do you see the screen with the dispatch assignment reporting form?
Yes.
Okay. You've been through the training. You're going through it a second time now. So you tell me what's jumping off this assignment reporting form to me. What's making me crazy?
Well, the first thing that jumps out at me is 65 open ROs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What did I tell you open ROs were when you and I were first getting training, and I said this was one of my pet peeves, and you were like, well, I don't know how we're going to do it. We got to figure it out, blah, blah, blah. But what can happen with these open ROs? What do they become?
Open ROs. Well, they could become buybacks.
Well, besides buybacks, because buybacks comes down here later in the report. But
okay.
The number of open ROs, when you have 65 open ROs, remember, an RO can hold stuff, right? An RO can hold labor and can hold parts. Okay? So you may have charged parts out on these ROs, but not billed them, right? So now your inventory is off, right? And they become an unimplied savings account that you may or may not ever collect on. So if let's say it's a big ticket and it's got, 5 job lines on it, and you guys do 3 of the job lines and the bike leaves and it's supposed to come back to get the work finished up, those parts might get billed out on that ticket and that bike might never come back. So then you've tied up inventory on a shelf somewhere, and then those parts become obsolete, right? And then what do you do with that expired inventory?
You have to sell it to reduce costs
or throw it away.
Yeah.
It just depends on what it is. So in the automotive industry, and I know that in the power sports industry, people fight me on this. I mean, dude, from ownership to general manager to parts, the parts department hates me for it, but service people get it. In the automotive industry, as a service writer, you can't have any open tickets at the end of the month. All of your open tickets, you need to be able to walk out to the parking lot and point at the vehicle and go, that's the vehicle for this repair order, and it's in process with a technician right now. If it's not in process with a technician, the RO needs to be closed. And so your open repair order list needs to reflect the active work on property, or all of your reporting is off. Does that make sense? Like
Yep.
everything you're tracking is false if the foundation of what you're tracking is incorrect. So you've got 21 vehicles on property. So you should have 21 repair orders, not 65.
Right.
And then if we start taking a look, you got 49 that are over 5 days, right?
Yep.
So I assume that those are for parts that were ordered or recalls that they ordered parts and the bike hasn't come in yet or something like that.
It could be
Um,
warranty oils that haven't been processed and billed.
One way around this is if you're ordering parts for somebody, like to do a recall, but the bike's not on property yet, you guys should have like a shop ticket. And on the shop ticket, you could bill out the part, order the part, right? And then reference the VIN number or the customer in that parts line, right? And then when the bike comes in for service, then you write the repair order and you reference the shop ticket that the part was ordered on. Now, I know that sounds like a pain in the butt. I know that sounds like I'm being nitpicky, but remember, especially if it's a recall is a warranty job or a customer pay job, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
Which?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was your question?
A recall is warranty or customer pay?
Oh, it's warranty.
Exactly. An OEM can have how many days in service under warranty during the warranty period?
Well, yes, of course.
30, right? So if Justin writes it, let's say it's a brand new Ducati. Let's say you guys have a brand new V4 Ducati. The recall comes out for the fuel line thing, right? The fuel coupler. Let's say that bike still applies to that. You guys sell the bike, and then the guy rides the bike away. But you're like, oh, you know what? We really got to do that recall, right? So you write a repair order and you order the fuel line recall parts, and that bike doesn't come in for 10 days. So on the 10th day, it comes in, you do the recall, you close out the paperwork, and now you've got 11 or 12 days on that repair order, right? If that bike comes in for another repair that year and you have to order parts, chances are that bike's eligible for a buyback.
Wow.
Okay? Because Ducati's warranty is still 2 years, right?
Yes.
So in 2 years, you can do 30 days of warranty work on that motorcycle before it's eligible for buyback in most states. Now, from a dealer perspective, you're going, what do I care, right? Ducati buys the buyback. I don't buy the buyback. That's Ducati's problem.
Yeah.
But when Ducati does an audit and they find out that you sat on paperwork for 12 days, all of a sudden Ducati goes, wait a minute, this isn't really our problem. This is your problem. And they might not be able to retaliate directly, but they retaliate in other ways. You want your relationship with the OEM to be solid, not one that's based on discontent.
So when you have a warranty repair, you get the part first, then schedule the bike to come in and get the work done.
Well, yeah, if it's like a recall and you order parts in advance, or if it's customer comes in, customer might ride up and go, oh, I've got a blemish on my fender, I've got a whatever, right? And Justin might look at it and go, oh, hey, let me just write a ticket on that real quick. I'll get the parts ordered and I'll call you when the parts come in. And the customer goes, oh man, that's awesome. And then he rides away. Justin writes up a repair order. He orders the part comes in. Remember, if he writes the repair order, it starts the day that he writes the repair order, right? So he writes the repair order, he orders the parts. 3 days later, the parts come in. Parts lets him know the next day. Then there's a weekend. And then there's you guys are closed on Mondays, I think, right? Are you closed on Mondays or no?
We're closed on Mondays.
You're closed on Monday. He calls on Tuesday, right? Customer says, I can bring it in on Friday or Saturday, right? So you see where I'm going, right?
Clock is ticking.
This easy repair just became 12 days. So what really needs to happen is order the part on the shop ticket. When the part comes in, notify the customer. When the customer comes in, write the repair order, get it done the same day and ship it out.
Shop ticket. I'm not familiar with how to do that, but I understand the point, and I will bring that up.
It's a process.
That takes away time off the the 30 days. You know, we put it on the shop ticket, then it's not, the clock doesn't start ticking until the bike comes in.
Yeah, and it's, there's 3 to 5 different ways to figure this out as a dealership, but you can't have 36 repair orders older than 30 days hanging out at your shop. I mean, any accountant, anybody involved in finance, anyone that would be in an audit process would take a look at that and go, out of 65 repair orders, almost half of them have been open for more than 30 days. So somehow, some way, you got to go through your open repair orders and you have to make the decision. Is this person coming back or not? And close the ticket. If it's got parts on it, return the part to parts. And if it's eligible to be returned to the OEM, return it. Like a lot of times, the OEM will they'll either have a yearly thing where you can make returns with no penalty. Right. Other times they'll say it's a 10% or a 12% or a 15% restocking fee. I'm here to tell you, 15% restocking to send parts back is still a bargain. Because remember, every dealership has a different policy for how they order parts. But if they're on an open to buy system, that's holding up funding from buying parts that you want to have in stock as a mechanic. If they are, floor planning stuff somehow, through finances, the sooner they get that off the books, the better. And then lastly, whatever parts you guys stock and store that's not actively being sold is taking up valuable floor space, which still costs you. Every square foot in your store costs you something, right? And so if you're storing parts that aren't going to turn, they need to find a way to get rid of that stuff. And so you need to determine, is the customer coming back or not? If the customer is not coming back, put the part back into stock and figure out a way to get it back to the supplier.
Right. We call that dead money in retail.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
Money is dead.
So that really, really, really needs to be cleaned up. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. The leaner your department can operate on paperwork and process, the more efficient and productive and profitable it's going to be. Right? So first step, if I was at your dealership doing a live consult, like in person, let's say I was going to live with you guys for a week or two, right? And go to work with you every day. The first thing I would do is clean up this open repair order list and make the list match the inventory on site. The second thing I would do would be really work on repair order writing processes so that what's on the paperwork communicates directly to the technician. Because that's going to create, dude, you have I'm sure you can imagine it, but I've seen it happen where technicians literally almost double their productivity by having the paperwork done correctly. So if you're currently creating 300 hours a month of billable labor, imagine if you created 600 hours of billable labor.
Yeah, and we could do that if I'm not going to get the crush washer, or I'm looking for the service manual because I need the specs for the rear axle and stuff like that.
So you've got a fair amount of distractions as a technician that you can work on yourself. But this number one thing is clear communication from the service counter. If we can fix the communication at the service counter and get you, and the other guy's name is Chris, right?
Right. Chris, Joey, and I.
Yeah. So remember 3 calls ago when you and Justin were in the room together, my challenge to you guys was find a way anyway that you and Chris could increase your billable hourly output per day by 1.5 to 2 hours per technician.
Okay, yeah, they did implement one thing. We have our own commonly used parts such as crush washers and oil filters and things like that downstairs in the service department. So Justin is not running up and downstairs every time he gives us a job. He has the parts right there behind the counter on a nice
perfectly
rack.
Acceptable, as long as you have some process in place to make sure that everything you take gets billed out on the ticket.
Yes.
Okay. Because the last thing you want to have happen is, you drop a crush washer and you just grab a new one because it's easier, right? Next thing you know, you got a floor full of crush washers and an inventory that's off. So you want to make sure that you track that and you apply it properly. But that's a good call. If that saves you guys time and money and gets you more productive, perfect. If you're working on, what are you working on? 5 vehicles a day? 4?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How many bikes are you working on a day average? 4?
3, maybe 4.
3, maybe 4. Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on,
If,
what's being
if
done.
each time you had to walk back and ask Justin what the ticket meant cost you 15 minutes,
Yep.
and I'm being very generous, right? That's your hour right there.
Yep.
Okay. So, and remember what we figured out. We did the math already. If your labor rate's $130 an hour and you have a good split on parts and labor, and you and Chris can each generate an extra hour a day, right? You're going to make me do the math again on my calculator because I've already confused myself. Let me get my calculator. So that would be 260 times 2 because there's 2 mechanics. It's 520. 520 times 5, because you work 5 days a week, right? Is $2,600 in parts and labor sales for the week. And if we multiply that by 50, because there's 50 work weeks in a year, that's $130,000.
Okay. Now, give me the whole equation. What equals $130,000? I can write this down.
Okay. Your shop rate is $130 an hour.
All right.
You should have a fairly reasonable split between parts and labor. So 1 hour of labor for you is equal to $260 in parts and labor, right? Because your department sells parts and sells labor.
Okay.
Okay. So each hour of productivity for you should be worth $260. Okay.
Okay.
I counted 2 mechanics. I didn't count Joe. I just counted you and Chris. Okay. So you and Chris each do an extra hour per day.
Yep.
At $260 per hour. So that becomes $520 per day. Right?
Right.
There's 5 work days in a week. So that becomes $2,600 a week in extra parts and labor sales. Now, the number one thing that I hear people say, right, when I'm doing this math is, well, we have busy seasons and slow seasons, and we don't know that we're always going to make $2,600 more a week. Well, you've already got a parking lot full of motorcycles to work on, so you've got the work now. So let's have that conversation now, right? When you guys do better customer service and get better with your productivity and efficiency, your workload's going to pick up, right? So you got your $2,600 a week, and now there's 50 work weeks in a year. There's 52 weeks in a year, but you only work for 50 weeks a year, right? So times 50 gets you the $130,000.
Yep, and that's just for finding 2 hours a day, 1 hour free technician, and that can be found by not having to make 4 trips to go get a crush washer or ask questions,
you're being nicer. You're being nicer than I am, Jeff. That $130,000 that your shop is losing every year is because your service tickets aren't written correctly. That's just the distraction of you going back to find out what the RO means. That has nothing to do with getting the right parts, crush washers, using cell phones during working hours, having friends visit the shop, smoke breaks. That $130,000 a year is just from not writing the repair orders correctly. Okay?
Okay.
So I know that this sounds hard to believe, Jeff. I know that when I talk, sometimes it sounds like hyperbole. I know that the numbers sometimes seem bigger than is possible. Okay? but I routinely work with shops that see an increase of $700,000 to $1 million a year in parts and labor sales from my training. And that's because if you take a look at just this one thing, just fixing the repair orders get you 130 grand a year. Getting the parts right to you for crush washers and all that stuff, that's another 130 to $200,000 a year, right? Getting technicians to agree to put their cell phones away and stop using Facebook, Twitter, and other things during the workday is another 100 grand a year. You know, reducing friend visits to the shop. In some shops, dude, sometimes that could be worth $250,000 a year. It's all based on the efficiency and the productivity that we can generate through establishing these processes, right? And coming up with ethical ways to run our business. Now, sometimes it sounds like I'm beating on the technician, like work harder, work faster, work harder, work faster. But that's not really the case. You'll notice that, you know, the training I'm focused on now is based on the service counter, and that in the end is of great service to the technician, right? If we can fix the RO process, and then the next thing we work on is the parts delivery process, right? Then the next thing we work on is the technician dispatch scheduling. Remember the sales funnel, the order that the work comes in?
Right.
If you have repair orders that are well written and well defined and a good parts delivery system, then you start working on that service sales funnel that I teach. Dude, you can bring an extra $500,000 to RJ's business this year if we follow these steps. And that's being modest. That's being absolutely modest.
But we can't do any of that unless we get these repair orders right. We have to.
But we got to get step one done. And that's why I wanted to record this session. I want to make sure that RJ gets a report on what we're doing, where the funding comes from. I mean, dude, for what I charge for the training, if you guys implement half of this, you know, you're getting a 10x return on what you paid for training. Yep. But you got to implement it. If you don't implement it, it's just a waste of everybody's time.
Okay.
All right.
So you're going to send this video clip to RJ?
Yeah, it's not the whole session. It's just from when I said I'm going to hit record.
Yeah, fantastic.
And that way you're not the bad guy. That's the other reason why I wanted to do what I did. I don't want you as a technician to have to be in the position of going to RJ and tattletaling or gossiping or whatever. I want to make sure that what we discuss is something that I can share with RJ. And then, you know, RJ might come to you and go, is this how this really went? You go, yeah, it's how it really went. You got the video, but yeah, you're not the bad guy.
I get it. Yeah, I understand.
Okay. We got to get this part fixed so we can work you guys through the steps of getting more efficient and productive with your time as a technician.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good. So what's the homework?
I will see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
What I would love to have is the rest of the homework on the heartbeat report.
Okay.
Because that homework is really going to help me drive some numbers, right? Let's say we get the RO writing process done, right? Let's say that we start getting the stories and the descriptions and all that. But let's say that I take a look at the heartbeat and I go, wow, we're really high on warranty, or we're really high on customer pay, or we're high on labor, low on parts, or we're high on parts, we're low on labor. Then that gives me an idea of how to work with Justin once the ROs are written correctly, how to work on sales techniques to begin to hit the, you know, the national average for what those ROs need to contain.
Okay.
And then that's where your profit really comes in.
Sounds like a process.
It's a process, right? But we've been doing this now since, when did you guys start? Was it March?
It was March.
It was March, and here we are, you know, it's already October.
Yes.
So we've basically got half a year into this process, right? And I think you and I are doing great on communicating, and you've done your homework, but we're getting to the point now where this training, what RJ signed up for is a year-long process, right? It's a year of access to my training. It's the 26 support calls along the way. You're going to be a little over 26, right? Mm-hmm. But it's more than a 2-day workshop. This is like an ongoing thing so that we can keep building you guys up. But we're getting to the point now where I've shared the content, and now it comes down to the implementation. Like, yep. You as a student, you know what needs to be done. You're just not in the proper position to implement it. So now we need to leverage some other things. And quite honestly, it can't all fall on your shoulders. If you're the student and you know the process and your shop decides not to implement the process, I can't fix that and you can't fix that. That's up to other people to implement.
Right.
But I want to do my due diligence and make sure that I communicate in a way that is positive, effective, and seeks positive growth.
You do that well.
Okay. So we're done for today. It was good to see you. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. If Justin can't get me the heartbeat report, I would love it if you could figure out a way to get that to me.
Yeah, we will. We will.
All right, brother.
If we have to
Have
do
yourself a good one.
it myself, I will.
All right.
Okay.
Peace.
All right. Take care.